right, we're here with Mike Dugan. He is running for U.S. Congress with the 3rd Congressional District in Georgia. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, yeah.
We would like to learn a little bit about you. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, I was raised in Bowden, Georgia, so it's just west of Carrollton, Georgia, in Carroll County. Went to Bowden High School, then went to the University of West Georgia. My father was the athletic director there, and what he says was, you're going to spend your first year at West Georgia, and then you can go to Athens. After that first year, you couldn't have pulled me away from West Georgia.
Right.
I loved it. Did a kind of a unique route afterwards. After I graduated from college, I enlisted in the Army.
Okay.
Did not make my mother happy, but it was the best decision for me at the time. About 3/4 of the way through the enlistment, they came to me and said, we think you should be an officer. So I went back to college, got my master's degree, got commissioned, and most importantly, got a wife. So we met in college, and for the next 20 plus years, I went around the world serving in the Army, and primarily in the Airborne Ranger community. And when I retired, we moved back home, moved to Carrollton. I went to work for a company called Ray Lynn. It's a construction company, and I was there for 16 years, retired early January this year. And while I was working at Ray Lynn, I was elected in 2013 to the state Senate. During my time in the state Senate, my peers honored me by selecting me unanimously to be the majority leader. I was the majority leader for 4 years. And then Drew decided that he was going to retire. And I felt it was time to use all the leadership training and skills and experiences that I've had over 30 years of public service to represent the people of the 3rd Congressional District.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for your service.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important in my family. And tell us, what skills are you bringing to this potential election?
So leadership, obviously. Leadership is the skills that you learn that are defined in you in the military are transferable. That's why people look for veterans in a wide variety of jobs post-military. So I've got the leadership training that I learned. I've got the legislative training that I've developed or got from the state Senate. So going to DC won't be a new thing for me. It's it's the same in every organization that involves people. It's all about being able to communicate, all about providing a vision, all about setting a program in place where people have say, they get to be part of the process, they see where you're wanting to go, and they work together to achieve something that's bigger than what any individual can do by themselves.
There is so much divisiveness, mostly out of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And it is being pushed across the country. How do you think that you can go in and make a real difference in Washington?
I'm sorry, I don't know your spiritual beliefs, but it's almost like a mission trip. If you go on a mission trip, you can't convert somebody by screaming at them. You have to work with them. You have to build a relationship. You have to establish trust by doing what you say and saying what you mean, and not throwing somebody under the bus at any opportunity for your own gain. And when things go well and there are successes, you let other people take the credit. And when things go bad, if you're the leader, then you have to stand up and say, hey, this was on me. And you learn from it and you move from there, and you just never make that mistake again. But if you're actually that involved and that engaged with others that are trying to do the right thing, then good things seem to always happen.
Right. So how does your faith, play out in this decision to run, and you say you see this as a mission, going to
Yeah.
Washington. Tell us a little bit more about your faith.
Well, it's a great question, because I am obviously Christian. That is, my faith is what kind of controls every facet of my life. I was raised Catholic. We go to primarily a Presbyterian church now. And one of the largest role models, the greatest role models I've seen in how to live your faith and walk with God are two people that are very dear to me, my wife and my son. My wife has got to be the most devout woman that I've ever met, and my son's in the ministry.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's nice to be in an environment where everybody, and even with our daughter, everybody has a common vision of what our faith is, and that helps make decisions. It helps live our lives. And if you're truly Christian, you do Christian things, and all the stuff I talked about just a second ago about treating others like you'd want to be treated, it's kind of one of the cores of that. So it has an impact on everything, not just the political aspect, but every part of my being.
I'm gonna ask you something here that maybe that is controversial. Wasn't planning on this, but based on your faith, I see so many strong Christian members that are in the Black Caucus,
Okay.
and they end up voting on things that do not appear to be in the Christian faith. That is not in the Christian faith. They seem to align with very liberal agendas, even though they, tout and walk a strong, Christian line. And why do you think that is? And how do you reach across the aisle with those in office that go against their faith to achieve? You may have aligned goals. I think that there's so many people across this country, the majority of the country, we all have aligned goals. We may not agree on exactly how to get there.
Yeah. Well, you've asked a self-described controversial question, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a controversial answer. Part of that is our fault as Republicans. There has been a long time where if you did not look exactly like me, you did not act exactly like me, you did not share 100% of my values, then I would call you a name and say you're not part of my party. And that's no way to grow a party. That's kind of the route to dying out, really, extinction. So that's one thing, is we have to be more open to actually engaging with people that we have not historically engaged with. Part two is there can be people, just because they're a Democrat does not mean that they're not people of faith.
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah.
So where you find where your ideas and ideals do align, you move forward with those things. One of the things that has troubled me in Washington for a while now is people are afraid to engage with somebody in a different party because they're afraid that it's going to label them something. I'm secure enough in who I am and what I believe and my Republican bona fides and my conservatism that I'll engage with somebody that's of a different party, as long as we're getting our strong conservative values and our policies, and we can make it life better for Georgians and Americans. I'll engage with anybody.
So there's 435 members of Congress, and in my opinion, there's 20 in the Republican Party and 20 in the Democratic Party that are all very independent thinkers, true agents of change that could really improve our country. But they have such a hard time of battling uphill of the party lines.
I agree with you part of the way. There are some times that I think that they're comfortable being the grit that produces the pearl, and are not always willing to work to do the hard due diligence. Anybody can find a problem.
Right.
I would love for them to help identify a solution more frequently. And then what I will say is, you have to understand that as a human in any organization, you're not going to get 100% of what you want 100% of the time. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be the voice. You shouldn't be the I know a lot consider themselves the conscience of the party. I'm not against that at all. But move, take a win. Go back to work, take the next win. Go back to work and take the next win. Don't lay down and throw a tantrum if you don't get 100% of the time.
And that would be within the bills, as you may have to take something within the bill to get what you want. You may get something that you're not thrilled about.
Yes. But that's not the end of the day.
Right. And in you saying that, this is, will you vote with the party line even though you're completely against something?
Oh, no. Never have. Never shown that tendency. First of all, my number one responsibility is to the citizens of the 3rd District. That is who hires me to do this job. And we've described this campaign over and over again. This is a job interview. It's probably the longest job interview anybody will ever have, but it's a job interview. And I understand implicitly who my employers are once elected. It's everybody in the 3rd District. So that's my number one priority. Now, would I probably vote with a majority of Republican pieces of legislation that were developed by Republicans, went through, hopefully, Republican-chaired committees, that, in all probability, yes, because we're Republicans. But if it's a principal issue, I won't discuss it. A principal issue that's a rock that you don't shift from. Policies, I'll look at the policies because I have noticed sometimes in my life that I wasn't right, and I will listen to other ideas. If it's something that principles, you never budge on.
Okay, I want to ask you maybe about multiple principles
Okay.
that you might have the opportunity to vote on.
Okay.
Mass immigration. There have been over 4 million encounters at the border, and that's just encounters. That's not how many are actually coming into the country. What is your position on mass immigration, and what is the potential solution?
See, I'm kind of confused with the term mass immigration. We have, 8.8 to 9 million illegal aliens that have crossed the border in the last 3 years. If you look at that, that's more than the population of 36 of our states. That is not sustainable. And I saw that President Biden put forth an executive order that allowed 125,000 people per day. I've been kind of busy, but I'm trying to keep up with everything across the border. If you look at it, that's like, do the math off the top of my head, that's like 1.5 million people that we've said their first act in this country is breaking a law.
Right.
I mean, it's a law. So no, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm more comfortable with sealing it, using the federal aspect of it, but also partnering with states and not working against the states that are trying to secure our borders. That is a facet of national security. We shouldn't work against them. After we have secured the border, and that's going to take a second, after we secure, then we do need to have a good look at a comprehensive immigration reform. We have not done that in a while, in a good long while. So you can't, it would not be beneficial to us as a nation to have no immigration.
Right.
We are internally, we are zero growth. So we do need to have some immigration to come in, but it needs to be done legally. And part of the problem that you'll have with the way it's working right now is you'll have people that are actually trying to follow the rules of our nation, the laws of our nation, and do it the right way. And they can't get in because we're using those assets that would be working with them to deal with the illegal crossings. And so these are getting pushed further and further back, and these are getting beneficial treatment for breaking the law. It doesn't make sense to me.
What do we do about all of the illegal immigrants or illegal aliens that have come into our country now? How how do you deport that many people? Do you deport?
So I've said a couple of times here recently, because I've been asked this question a couple of, if you break a law, that's now the second law that you've broken. You're gone. You're out. The other way is a lot more difficult. I want to see what somebody's proposal is on how to do this. Are you going to go around to every person in the nation that has a look and bring them in and start questioning them? That is against almost everything American right there. Mm-hmm. So the first thing right now that I would say, you break that second law, you're out. But I'm open to ideas on how you do this mass deportation without profiling and, bringing on a lot of lawsuits because there's going to be a lot of people that are U.S. citizens that you've arrested wrongly.
Mike, would you be open to looking at how ownership is done in other countries, perhaps, as an example?
Absolutely. So one of the things you'll kind of learn about me is I never say there's no way I'll ever do that from the get-go. If I don't know, if I'm not the expert on the subject, you're smarter at this facet than I am. Hopefully I'll say for right now, because my goal is always to learn more.
Right.
But yeah, I'm open to see how everybody does it.
I was surprised. I studied real estate in Singapore and Hong Kong back in 2016. And there was, at that time, there was 92% home ownership in Singapore.
Which is not an inexpensive country.
Right. I mean, it's a very financially secure, very sound country. Uh-huh. And of that 92% home ownership, 96% of it was subsidized loans through their government, but it was subsidized through their future earnings. So instead of Social Security, 20% of their income goes into forced savings. And so instead of a tax, they have a forced savings that is held in a government account. From my interpretation of meeting with them, this is how I interpret it. 20% was held in a government account. They had control that they could invest that in stocks, housing, over time. But so when they first got out of college, when they first entered the job market, when they're first getting married, they could go purchase a home even though they didn't have a down payment, even though they may not have everything that would be required as a pre-qualification in the United States right now. And they borrowed it against their future earnings because it would be like us borrowing from our future Social Security, which I understand why we can't borrow from our Social Security, because I don't trust that our Social Security is even going to be there in the future. But so this is, multiple, thoughts here is getting to control your own future retirement funds from forced savings and being able to borrow against that for health care, for housing, for other needs. That is their emergency funds or savings that are required.
Yeah, I mean, my experiences with Singapore, it's a very homogeneous society for the most part. The population is less than the population of Georgia. You can be arrested for chewing gum and spitting on the sidewalk. It is a very, very disciplined society. But I'll go out of real estate for a second and put it in a different context and then come back to it. The Germans have an apprenticeship program that really is effective for what we would consider high school. Their schooling is called a little bit different. But for high school age kids, we actually incorporated that in Georgia 3 years ago. And everybody goes, you have the German model. And I went, no, we have more like the Swiss model. And the difference is the German model mandates that people, they pick for you. So anytime that in the United States that you have government picking your future for you, I get a little antsy, and I'm thinking other people would too.
Oh, yeah.
But I do like the idea of thinking other than just continuing doing it the way we've been doing it, to look at other options. So,
But with that, right now we are mandated to pay taxes.
yeah, you are mandated to pay taxes.
And so the mandated for forced savings, as opposed to forced Social Security taxes.
We are mandated to pay taxes. You know what the individual tax rate is in Singapore?
I don't.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 50%.
Okay.
So,
And I'm not saying that's the right one, but
Yeah.
I was surprised by what I learned while I was there.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that there are probably some other ideas
Absolutely.
that have not been even thought about.
yeah, and we ought to be thinking about them. So that's why I'm not saying no to this whole thing, because I think there are, worst case scenario, there are bits and pieces of it that we can pull out, that we can cobble with other bits and pieces from other places, and actually, and that's what I was talking about before, actually create something that is a game changer.
Right. If you look at our basically subsidized rent now in all of our housing authorities across the country, the amount of money that is spent on individuals for renting, if somehow that was a short-term investment in those individuals with ownership or the pride of ownership, somehow it just seems like there is a lot of money that is provided that does not bring about the pride in the money that's given.
Yeah.
If there can be more ownership in helping people to become sustainable, and there is wealth to be built. A lot of people have built their wealth through real estate, and the home ownership is so important with having stability, not having to move frequently, and having the pride of that home ownership. And I don't want to see that go away in our country.
Yep, I think that's what we were talking about before when we said the American dream. So yeah, I agree that we ought to be looking at different ideas on how to improve this. So you got a week and a half. I expect to see a full paper on how to do it.
Yes.
No, but we do need to work together as within your industry, within the building industry, across sections, to actually come up with a good plan instead of counting on a bunch of people living in DC that have no idea what this industry really, really entails, making decisions for us.
That's right.
So,
Government spending.
Yeah, we spent too much. We spent way too much.
The U.S. debt has increased 35% since 2020. So we're near 35 trillion, which is 103,000 per person in the United States.
Yeah, our debt service, I think it's right now more we're paying on our debt than we're paying on our national defense. That is not solely a Democrat issue. That is also a Republican issue. Now, part of that is we have to have the backbone, the spine, to look at all areas of spending and make tough decisions. Now, we did that in Georgia all the time. I mean, that was every year you go into a zero-based budget and you start the process all over. And one of the things you couldn't do was you couldn't spend more than you brought in. Now, people say, well, you got bond packages in there. It's a little bit different. These are things that we are putting on the back shelf in a bond that we can get a return on later. And we're fortunate that we can get such a great return on the bond packages because we are so conservative in the way that we do the budgeting process, which keeps our bond rating high. So I would like to take our Georgia values and implement them as much as you possibly can throughout this entire process in DC. Do I think that I can get to a balanced budget amendment within the first couple of years? No, but I would like for us to start working to a way where at least we're able to reduce that deficit and get us into a more controlled spending environment. Part two of that is some of the things that we're spending on are really not the federal government's responsibility. The federal government has been usurping more and more authority from the states, and we need to let the states do what the states are constitutionally required to do, and have the federal government, focus on what the federal government is supposed to do. And that way, and that's a small piece. I get that, but that small pieces add up. By doing that, you, in essence, are reducing some spending right there.
Right. Our families are struggling.
Yes.
I mean, most Americans' household savings have been depleted. inflation is out the roof. And, just in our family discussions, I've talked about is how do you balance the budget? And multiple people in my family have said, you can't balance, will there ever be a balanced budget again? What is your opinion on that?
We should try. Can I guarantee that we will? No, but shame on us if we don't work towards it. If we don't try to at least make that effort. There is not an entity in the United States, whether it be a family or a business, that if they spend more than they bring in, it does not get them in trouble. So I don't understand why the federal government does not have the same ideas about responsibility, responsible budgeting.
How do you change that as one person going into Congress? How do you change that?
As one person going in that meets another person that's going in, that meets 4 more people that are going in that have the same ideas, but have been working have been not able to find enough of a cohesive unit to build. And they are in every organization out there. There are people that see the futility in the way we've been doing it for a while, that want something better to come along. We just gotta find each other and work together. They're in every place.
I want to ask you about the war in Ukraine.
Okay.
175 billion has been allocated in 5 different aid packages. In my personal opinion, this is a war that is not, Ukraine is not capable of winning without long-term sustained financial support and potential troop support and involvement. Where do you cut this off? What is the end game for the U.S. supporting the Ukrainian war?
So I think that we went about it the wrong way to start with. I think that all about supporting our allies. I get that. I think it should have been more of a lend-lease policy like we did with the allied nations during World War II. But it's not a carte blanche. I remember Iraq, the early days, when planes would show up with pallets of dollars and it would just disappear. That was not effective. All that did is made some bad people richer. But a lend-lease thing where we will provide you this. Here's the interest that you got on this. You have to pay this back over a period of time, or there are some concessions that the U.S. will take at the end of the day. So that's that was the approach I would prefer that we take.
Future financial requests from Ukraine. Will you vote yes or no?
What do you?
So are you going to continue to give financial support? If there's another bill that is put before you, will you vote yes or no?
If they have what I'm talking about right now with, I hate to say the term strings tied attachments, but there's strings tied to it. Yes, I would consider it then. But just a blank check, I've been pretty clear on that so far, and no more blank checks.
So we continue giving money. How long? I mean, what is the best case scenario outcome that you've been in the military?
Best case scenario outcome is an adversary, and Russia is an adversary that loses in their attempt to take over another nation that we have signed an agreement with. If that happens, then if I'm Poland, I'm starting to get real antsy. Then, where does that stop? I don't want to keep giving a blank check to the Ukraine, but I don't want the Russians to be successful in taking over a sovereign nation and embolden them going forward. Because if that happens, where's Taiwan go?
That was another question. Is China's looking at this?
China's watching this as a test case, and you got to know that. They're looking at this and Israel as a test case to see how they can control U.S. think when they go into Taiwan. China has forever played the long game, but they have, you can tell by their actions going on out there, they have designs on Taiwan.
Right.
What do we do with Taiwan if they get attacked? They're an ally. And if we're not going to support allies, then why bother going through the process?
What is the diplomatic approach to support and prevent the war?
That has been there's books written on that back to medieval period. Um, Diplomacy and military strength are extensions of each other. You have a strong diplomacy by, you negotiate with potential adversaries so that they don't become an actual adversary. But if you do it from a position of weakness, you're only holding half the cards. Our military has gone a direction that I'm not 100% comfortable with. To me, from the outside, and admittedly, I've been retired from the Army for a little bit now. It seems more like a social experiment than what it was designed for, to protect and defend the United States. And we have to get back to that purpose and goal or vision, a clear purpose for the reason of having a military that makes our young men and women decide, yes, I not only want to defend my nation, but I want to join this organization, this entity to do it. If we can have a strong military, then the negotiating that's done from the State Department side, most likely, has a lot more weight to it.
My father-in-law was a colonel in the Air Force. Both of his, my husband's grandparents, both granddads on both sides, were colonels in the Air Force. So a very military family. I have 4 children. My oldest daughter, her granddad encouraged her, military. Is when she was a young child growing up, consider Air Force Academy.
Yeah.
But there's 10 years in between my first and second child. And so I have 2 boys there, my middle boys, and he did not recommend them go into the military. And they're both in college now. And he is from a military background like you, and a long line of family, military leaders. And his concern was who is leading our military now and what you're going to be sent into. So how do you not just change the perception, because you can change the perception without it being a real change, but how do you have strong, young men and women in the military that will be our future leaders? How do you bring the best and the brightest back into the military?
Yeah, you said something that I don't agree with. I don't think you can change the perception without changing the reality. And I understand perception is reality. Perception is a view of what reality is. It doesn't carry enough weight to be sustainable to fool people for that long.
You can try to fool for a short time.
Yeah, for a short time.
Yeah.
But that's not sustainable. So I don't know if you're going to be asking this question or not, but one of the questions I'm often asked is, what committees would you like to serve on when you're there? One of the committees that I always answer is the House Armed Services Committee. So you have some influence on the actions that the military takes from your position within Congress. I mean, understand the military is technically part of the executive branch, but all of it's funded by Congress. So people in Congress have sway over how it's going. And if we don't like it, we ought to voice our displeasure at it.
And that is not approving some of the bills that may be asked.
Yeah.
Okay. And so really making our military to be the best in the world again. You're willing to take a stance and vote no on bills that you think need to be voted no to get us there. What was your opinion on Tommy Tuberville is that he would not approve appointments for the military. And this went on for months. I don't know if it went on a year, but I know it went on for a long time, that he got a lot of slack for that. Are you willing to be unpopular if it's something you believe in like that?
First of all, I'm gonna, in my mind, correct something you said.
Okay,
And
yes,
may
yes,
not,
please do.
You may not see it as a correction. We still have the best military in the world. The only difference is I want to be so much better than anybody else's that nobody ever challenges it.
Right.
So that's a little different than what you just said. No, I was not happy with Senator Tuberville. I was not. Again, that's one of those. There was another way that he could have done it that would have enabled him to get his point across that other people tried to share with him. And there's a difference between being committed and just being stubborn to be stubborn. And now I'm basing that off. I still have a lot of friends that are in the military, and this was their day-to-day life. They're sacrificing everything, to potentially down to their lives, to defend us. So don't play with that. Find a solution. Work towards a solution. Other than, if you don't do this, I'm gonna take my ball and go home. So, sorry if that's again.
No, yeah.
But,
I appreciate that opinion. Yeah.
But there were other ways. And I like Senator Tuberville. I actually helped campaign for him when he was running the first time, because Carrollton's right on the Alabama line, and unfortunately, we have a bunch of Auburn people that live in my area as a proud Georgia fan. But no, I don't think he's evil. I just don't agree with how he did that.
Okay. But you wouldn't have a problem taking an approach that may not be popular.
No, not at all. I seem to often do that. But I also bring in, here's what I see as the issue. Here's what I see as a solution. But I have voted against my party lines a bunch of times. Not all the time, because most of the time we work together. But when there's a time where I think we are going down the wrong path, I'm not afraid to stand up and say, no, that's not the path we should go down,
Okay.
with a potential solution.
I'm going to change topics.
Okay.
And ask you about something that's very important to so many across our country, and it's important to me as well: home ownership.
Yeah.
So home prices are up 47%
That's right.
since 2020. We're at historical low inventory, and we now have, at a substantial scale, institutional buyers that are competing with homeowners as well. What is your opinion of the importance of homeownership in America?
Well, that's working with realtors throughout the district, even back in the state senate days, to try to get to try to find resolution for this. I'm sure, as you know, when you're building new homes, the most expensive part is the property that you're building it on. So that's a huge cost.
Percentage of it.
Yeah. And then you look at oftentimes the amenities that people are thinking as must-haves within a home that a decade and a half ago would have been considered luxuries. So there's expectation factors in there as well. And then with the Biden administration's economic policies, we're in an inflationary period where the cost of the materials, the cost of the labor, everything has skyrocketed. And then even in local ordinance, I see a minimum foot requirement on houses that may exceed what people actually want and need in life. And so where I live in Carrollton, I live in an old part of town. My house is 132 years old. So there's several around there that are 80, 90 years old that are small mill type housing. That 80 years of people have lived in comfortably and called home. But you couldn't build those houses now.
Right.
So some of it is looking introspectively and why are we doing what we're doing and what are the reasons for doing it. And some of it is economic with what you're talking about with me a little while ago about the economy on with the inflationary period. Some of it's expectations. The part that I don't have a 100% answer on yet that has been problematic is people buying into neighborhoods with the intention of renting, which if they're the large corporate buyers, they can outbid the local family that's coming in that's wanting to buy that property for their value. So I'm open to working with you and your organizations to figure out how we get to the bottom of this. I mean, everybody wants property or housing prices lower, except for the person that's selling the house. And everybody wants it capped, except for the person that's selling the house. So, help me find a solution to that.
Right. But home ownership is important
It
to
is
you.
absolutely important. I think that's the American dream. It's still the American
Right.
dream.
Right.
It's but the American dream of what my house looks like is going to be different than the American dream of what somebody else's house looks like. We ought to have the ability to have people live their American dream and raise a family in a house where they mark on the door frames as their children grow. That when the kids are gone and they come back with their kids, you take them back to where your bedroom was in the house. Yeah, that's what everybody wants.
In your opinion, what are the most significant issues facing America today?
The situation at the border, like I said, it's a 50-meter target, and that's just because it has such a widespread, long-lasting impact, potentially. We need to address it as soon as we possibly can. The debt is number two, just because you don't want to be in a point where you're not worried about losing your nation to another country in a war, because all they have to do is close on your debt and just buy you. You never want to put yourself in that situation. And then I know this is going to sound like just out of left field. I'm a little worried about AI. I understand the potential of AI. I understand that it could be a game-changing tool, but it can also be, and we just don't know yet. And I would rather not let that genie all the way out of the bottle without having some guardrails on it. So that's immediate, ongoing, and a little bit out there that I wish we'd take a look at.
Okay. And what are the goals that you have set out for your term in office? If elected,
Yeah.
then what do you hope to achieve over the next couple of years?
Conservative legislative programs, bills, legislation that actually move America forward would be one. And I'm hoping you're not specific bills, because there's a thousand of these. That would be one, is to be able to work comprehensively with a group of peers to get a majority to agree to a position to move legislation forward that has a positive impact on our nation, which that's a big goal, because we're not doing that every day now. And the second one is being, and this seems like it should be a given, is being responsive and responsible to the constituents of the 3rd District. They need a congressman that they know they can get in contact with, that will serve their needs back at home, that when they have an issue with the VA, with Social Security, with something as simple as a passport, they can get that fulfilled. They don't need to worry about where that's going to come from, where that support's going to come from. And they need to know that they have a congressman that they're going to be able to see as frequently as they possibly can, with a set schedule throughout the district. And there's 15 counties in the district, so you wouldn't see me every weekend, But you need to know that on a specified date and time that I'll be here in the area, and you can come and I'll tell you what we've been doing, and you can say the issues you're having, and an office that is responsive. So, I mean, that's in DC, the overarching goal. Here at home, how to remain responsive to the constituents, and always do it in a manner that's professional, respectful, and something that will never embarrass you.
Very good. Well, Mike, I very much appreciate you taking time to be with us today and to answer some questions. And good luck in the runoff. The early election starts June 10th, and the election day is on June 18th. So make sure your vote counts.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
We're here with Brian Jack. He is in the U.S. Congress runoff for the 3rd District for Georgia. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really grateful.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am from Peachtree City, Georgia, and I went to Woodward Academy just up the road. And I had the chance and the privilege over the last 8 years of working for the greatest president of our lifetimes, President Donald J. Trump. But what's unique about it is I had a chance to start my career at the most local level working at Peachtree City Hall. So I worked in the Planning Commission, the mayor's office, and for the last 8 years, as I noted, worked for the president, and had a chance to be with him from day one of his White House to the last day of his White House, and was able to do a lot for our district and do a lot for our country while serving by his side.
What do you see are the most pressing issues facing our country right now?
Well, we hear a lot about this across the trail, that a wide open border, rampant inflation, and I'd love to speak about both of those. But I think last Thursday brought to the forefront this two-tiered system of justice that we see being pervaded across our country in localities like Manhattan, up the road in Fulton County, and Washington, D.C. We're seeing over and over and over a weaponized judiciary system and justice system it has two tiers and two standards of justice for conservatives like President Trump and liberals that get away with everything. So I hear about that a lot, and I think our next Congress can use the power of the purse and use the power of the subpoena to do everything possible to ensure this doesn't happen again.
And there's so much divisiveness, and it really starts in Washington.
Sure.
And is being pushed across the country. What are you going to do to try to bring about change in being able to work with people? I believe that most people have the good of the country, in their heart, and that we have so many aligned goals. We may not agree exactly on how to get there, but there's far more things that are agreed upon usually than disagreed.
Sure.
Are you going to stand the party line, or are you going to be an independent thinker?
Yeah, no question. Well, I think I would just look at my experience. Over 4 years, I worked with some of the most moderates, some of the most conservative members of Congress to push and pass President Trump's agenda. And we had remarkable success. In 2017, I was one of his point people negotiating the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. Unbelievable economic success from that. And we had to work across the aisle. We had to work within the party itself to make sure we got that done. And we delivered for our district and the American people. So I've proven that I can work across the spectrum, and I think that is reflected by a lot of people that support me. But ultimately, we've also got to stand true to our principles. And one thing I know the voters of this district want and certainly care about is somebody that's going to do what they say they're going to do. So I've been very proud to run a positive campaign that's issues-based and thought-based, and excited about where that goes.
Since you were there during President Trump's office, how do you think that COVID should have been handled looking back? Is it got way out of control with who ended up having the power?
Well, I think that at the outset, there was a lot of confusion. And if we take ourselves back to that time, this started happening, the TV's going crazy, it's a crisis that's being elevated. I think that what President Trump wanted was freedom. And as somebody myself that certainly appreciates that freedom, I talk about this a lot on the campaign trail. We cannot forget what happened in 2021 when the Biden administration did everything they could to divide Americans on serious questions about health. If you question the efficacy of the vaccine, the Biden administration and his allies on the radical left called those that you just had questions about their own health threats to humanity. I'm a big believer in natural immunity, and I think ultimately what President Trump wanted is for people to have freedom and choice in that sense. And And certainly we didn't see that with the Biden administration.
So am I to infer that you do not support mandates?
Oh, no. I mean, I think that's, at the end of the day, we saw, and this is one area where I think Governor Kemp deserves a lot of credit. He pushed forth and wanted to ensure that our state was able to continue thriving. And I find it ironic that 3 years later, no one talks about it. No one talks about what happened, but I certainly do on the
Right.
campaign trail talk about just how concerning it is that we had a government that tried to divide its citizens against each people and have signs on the doors saying, if you don't have a vaccine, you're unable to come into this restaurant. That happened in America within the last 3 years.
So if there is something that comes forward in the next couple of years that includes mandates on health or mandates on other things, your position would be freedom, not mandates from
Yeah,
government.
you've got to have freedom, and I think ultimately that's what it's something that I personally believe with my own decisions as it relates to that specific issue, but more importantly, I mean, that's what our founders fought for the right for us to have. And I say this too, for anybody watching, our founders fought for us to give us the right to vote. And we have an election, a runoff election, as you noted, on June 18th, early voting's from June 10th to June 14th. Some analysts predict that we will only have 4 or 5% turnout in our district, which means, for anybody watching at home, that means you see 100 people during the day, 95 of them don't care enough to vote in this election. We've got to do everything we can, honor our forefathers, get people out to vote. I'm talking about it as much as I possibly can through June 18th, and I'll be doing everything I can as a Republican nominee for Congress to make sure even more people vote this November.
And that's exactly one reason that we're doing these interviews. I want to ask you about government spending. Government spending is completely out of control. The U.S. debt has increased 35% since 2020. We're at nearly 35 trillion, and that's 103,000 per person in the United States. Each family, I have to budget, for my family, for my company, but politicians don't seem to understand a budget.
Yeah.
Will we ever have a balanced budget again, and where do you stand, and how do you plan to create change on that?
Well, one of the things I talk a lot about is, it's been 32 years since we last amended the U.S. Constitution, and I can't think of a better legacy-defining moment for Donald Trump than to be the spearhead at trying to pass and enact a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. It's very popular. 80% of Americans agree with it. 49 of 50 states in our country have some version of a balanced budget amendment. So, to pass an amendment to the Constitution, you need state legislatures on board, you need Congress on board. I will be an advocate for that from day one, and somebody who has Donald Trump's ear, somebody who's worked with him as closely as I have, I hope to have an impact on that, because I can't think of a greater, when you think of presidential legacy, I can't think of a greater legacy-defining moment than to pass and enact a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution.
Our war in Ukraine, $175 billion with 5 aid packages. If there is another package that comes before, a bill to be approved to send money to Ukraine, yes or no?
Yeah, I don't think our district supports it, to be honest. And I certainly see that and feel that across the district. And I just had an interview earlier today where I effectuated the same response. That having been said, I hope it's going to be a moot point, because as I firmly believe, when President Trump's elected this November, sworn into office in January, I think that war will instantly stop. I think that Vladimir Putin fears him, and I think what we see today, I saw it in Normandy, you probably saw it too, you have a world that does not fear Joe Biden. They laugh at Joe Biden. And that's America standing in the world, and it's a shame. But I think when Donald Trump's elected president, he's going to fix it, and hopefully that situation is completely resolved.
Mass immigration, illegal aliens coming to the country, 4 million encounters at the border in 2023. That's not how many actually came in, that's how many were encountered. Your position?
So 2 things on that. First and foremost, I strongly support what President Trump has said, the largest domestic deportation operation in our country's history. And guess what? 42% of Democrats now support that exact language, because they recognize this is a system that's out of control. But I also take it a step further, and I talk about the threats that big tech can pose in our society. When we talk about how many illegal immigrants are in the country, I'd encourage each and every one of your viewers, Google how many illegal immigrants are in the country. The first answer that pops up is going to be 10 million. It's really 17 million. We can't trust big tech to tell us the truth. This is a problem, and the only way it's going to stop is if we're tough on it, and we have a congressman that's going to stand strong. Even when the newspapers say negative things and nasty things about it, we've got to do it. We cannot have a country thrive if we've got 20 million illegal immigrants in our country.
So with making sure our borders are secure, but how do you deport everyone that's here that's here illegally?
So you've got to get the resources. I work closely with Stephen Miller, who was the architect of our immigration policy from 17 to 21. You've got to provide the resources necessary to ensure that the government can do what it needs to do. A lot of times, folks are being released illegally into our communities because there's not enough detention beds, or the Border Patrol hasn't been given the authority that it needs to ensure it can deport folks. So you got to do everything you can to finance and fund that, and I look forward to being a part of that solution next Congress.
Home ownership.
Yeah.
Home prices are up 47% since 2020. Historically low inventory, institutional buyers at major levels now. And inflation is primarily driven by government now. It's
Yeah.
government spending that's out of control that's really causing the inflation that has really led to the increase in house prices due to material costs.
Sure.
So what is your opinion on the sanctity of home ownership in our country?
Challenge with the challenge to your point with the rising costs, inflation's out of control, and everything has an energy cost associated with it. The chairs we're sitting on have an energy cost associated with it. The paper, anything in this beautiful home has an energy cost associated with it. We've got to do what we can to fight inflation by unleashing America's energy reserves. God has given us abundant resources across our country. We should do everything we can to harness that energy potential and drive down energy costs. Second, we should deregulate. Would love to chat more about that at a subsequent time, but we in the Trump administration, for every regulation put on the books, we repealed 8 existing regulations. And lastly, as you noted before, we reined in government spending. You do those 3 things, we can drive down inflation, drive down home prices in a sense that we can make it easier for people to buy homes, but at the same time protect the value of those that are owned.
What do you want to be known for when you leave Congress? If you're elected, what are your goals over the next several years?
I want to be an effective congressman. I want to be somebody that puts my head down, and I think we've got a long lineage of people that have represented this district that put their head down, and that's exactly how I want to be and how I want to legislate. But also, I think there's some emerging technologies that Congress is going to have to grapple with, and somebody that's been experienced with some of those technologies before, I think of artificial intelligence. I think of the way that our society is going to function moving forward. I would love to make that something I really dig into in Congress and ensure that we harness the potential, but ensure we also protect some of our most vulnerable citizens alongside us.
Okay, well, great. Well, Brian, I really appreciate you being here today. We want to make sure that you vote, that your vote counts. Early voting starts June 10th. The runoff election is on June 18th. Make sure your vote counts. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much. Really grateful.